For any REDD Plus initiative to really work, to be sustainable in the long run, both operationally and financially, it just can't be built on shaky ground. It needs a solid bedrock, a strong foundation. And that foundation, the single most important piece of the puzzle, is good governance.
So, in this explainer, we're going to break down what good governance actually means for REDD Plus. We'll dig into why it's so critical, see how it links up with global policies like the Cancun safeguards, check out how it's being put into practice, and really get why it's the absolute non-negotiable key to making this all work.
Okay, let's get right into it. Before we can understand its importance, we have to be on the same page about what we even mean by governance. Because honestly, it's a word that goes way beyond just the government. A really good way to think of it is as the entire operating system for our forests. It's not just the formal regulations. It's this whole web of rules, both written and unwritten, the institutions involved from local communities all the way up to national agencies, and, this is key, the power dynamics that decide who makes the decisions, who's in charge of taking action, and who gets held accountable when things go wrong. And that big concept is really built on these core principles you see here. And I want to be clear. Things like participation, transparency, and accountability, they aren't just buzzwords you slap on a report. No way. They are the essential practical ingredients that have to be baked into every single stage of the REDD Plus process, from the initial planning all the way through to how the money is managed and shared. So what happens when that foundation has cracks in it? Let's take a look at how poor governance isn't some side issue. It's actually a powerful, indirect driver of the very deforestation REDD Plus is trying to stop. Asking this question really helps us move from the abstract to the real world. I mean, how do concepts like weak rule of law or lack of transparency actually turn into trees being cut down on the ground? Well, the connections are direct, and they can be devastating. When you have insecure land tenure, for example, it creates uncertainty and completely removes the incentive for people to manage forests sustainably. And the data on this is just stark. Get this. A review of 31 national REDD Plus readiness plans showed that a staggering 93% of countries identified weak governance as a critical underlying reason for their deforestation. 93%. And let's look at a real-world case from Nepal to see this chain reaction. Poor transparency and corruption. That sounds like a big, vague problem, right? But as you can see in the table, it directly leads to things like bribing land commission officials. And that, in turn, allows land mafias to just come in and encroach on forest land, a direct cause of deforestation. Combine that with weak law enforcement, and you have a system with no capacity to stop it. It's a clear and incredibly destructive domino effect. So, because everyone recognized that these internal governance problems were a massive risk to the whole system, the international community actually built a formal blueprint for good governance right into the rulebook for REDD Plus. This right here is Cancun Safeguard B, and it's a really critical piece of the puzzle. This is the international requirement that takes good governance from just being a best practice and makes it a core, non-negotiable obligation for countries doing REDD Plus. Basically, to be eligible for payments for reducing emissions, you have to prove your governance structures are both transparent and effective. So, what does that actually look like in practice? Well, it means breaking it down into these very tangible pieces. Countries have to show real progress on everything from securing land rights and actually enforcing the law, to making sure their policies aren't contradicting each other. Each one of these is a crucial building block for a strong, transparent system. Okay, so how does a high-level policy like that actually get put into practice on the ground? This is where something called a country approach to safeguards really comes into the picture. Basically, countries start with what they already have. First, they make sure the right policies, laws, and regulations, or PLRs, are in place. Step 2, they figure out the institutional arrangements, basically who is responsible for what. And finally, Step 3, they set up information systems to track and share how it's all going. Often, the most crucial first step is to strengthen the legal framework itself. Clarifying land tenure is just paramount. Why? Because when communities have secure rights to their land, they have a powerful reason to manage it sustainably. A fantastic example from Cambodia is a project that used Open Tenure, which is a tablet-based tool that literally empowers communities to map and record their own rights. It's also about harmonizing laws. In Myanmar, for instance, you had these overlapping definitions of forest land and agricultural land that created legal loopholes just ripe for exploitation. But of course, great laws don't mean much if they aren't enforced.
This means building stronger institutions. Indonesia, for example, pioneered what they call a multi-door approach to fighting forest crimes, using anti-corruption and anti-money laundering laws to back up their forestry laws. And just as important is creating grievance mechanisms so people have a place to go if things go wrong. The DRC's National REDD Plus Fund is a great example, with its multiple channels for complaints and even double-blind reviews of proposals to keep things accountable.
When you get down to it, good governance isn't a box you can just check off a list and be done with it. It's a constant, ongoing process. It has to be woven into every single part of the REDD Plus cycle, from the initial deep dive into what's driving deforestation, all the way to how funds are managed and benefits are shared transparently. And that brings us to our final, and honestly, our most important point. Let's pull all these threads together to really hammer home the role that good governance plays in REDD Plus. Let's be perfectly clear on this. Good governance is not an optional extra. It is the fundamental enabling factor for success. Without that strong foundation, any REDD Plus strategy is just going to be vulnerable to the very same underlying forces, the corruption, the weak tenure, the poor enforcement, that were driving deforestation in the first place. So the frameworks and the principles are there. The real challenge now is all about implementation and really acceleration. So the question we'll leave you with is this: how can countries speed up these essential governance reforms to finally unlock the full potential of REDD Plus finance and deliver lasting results for our forests and for our climate?